Karesh Prime's day broke like a kiln door opening, a flat wall of heat sliding across the dunes, until it struck the basalt shoulders of the Zerati fortress. The stronghold obelisk bastion was a blade of shadow driven into the desert, its outer skin ribbed with cooling fins that sang faintly as wind rushed through them. Deep inside, where heat had been tamed into soft ambient warmth, the nursery woke to a chorus of small, pleased sounds. General Sharek's 3 cubs tested the morning with their noses first. They were still small, by Zerati standards each the length of a Terran shepherd. All pause and curiosity, but the molten pattern bands across their pelts already marked them as highborn. The eldest, Keth, had a fracture of pale copper down his spine that glittered when he moved. Rava, the middle, wore a collar of dark bronze that made her eyes look darker still. The youngest, Soon, had irregular rosettes that never seemed to settle into the same shape twice. "Little storms," murmured Keeper Ishrani, pressing her palms together to greet them. The scent of her greeting unfurled into the air, clay sweet and reassuring. Zerati spoke as much with scent as with voice. In the nursery, everything smelled of safe things: cooked grain, polished stone, warm fur. Eat, run, break nothing that cannot be mended. Keth launched himself at a stack of balance rings and scattered them like hammered coins. Rava leapt to the top of a sunlit slab and flattened there, eyes slitted, tracking a dust mote with the concentration of a gunner. Soon rolled onto his back and batted at the ceiling's gentle convection currents. As if they were visible strings, Ishrani watched, amused. Somewhere above, obelisk's sirens tested themselves, one long soft note. More tremor than sound, then fell silent. The day hung, ordinary as a breath. In the corridor beyond the nursery, the guard of 8 rotated posts. In the western hangar, a drone bay's doors cycloned open to let a flock of recon kites surge into the sky. In the brig far below, a single human heartbeat recorded its patient, stubborn rhythm against the monitoring grid. General Sharek entered without fanfare. He moved with a weight that discouraged noise. The fur along his forearms braided with the tiny steel beads of service. A scar like a lightning fork split his muzzle from lip to eye, old, well-kept, respected. The scent he carried today was oil and sun metal and a thread of cold salt. He had been to the wall. "Great one," Ishrani said, lowering her head. Sharek set his right hand against her shoulder in acknowledgement, a gesture that would have broken lesser bones if he had not been careful. The cubs went wild at the sight of him. Keth barreled into his father's shin, then folded himself against the general's boot with a groan of contentment. Rava tried very hard to pretend she was above it all, failed in 5 seconds, and headbutted Sharek's knee. Soon skidded across the smooth stone and collided with his own tail. Sharek's voice softened only here, only with them. "My war." He kneeled until his eyes were level with theirs, touched each brow ridge in turn, breathed their names into their ears so the sound sank all the way through to bone. The cubs replied with small, fierce chirrups that meant, "You are home, you are sent. You are the right place. Any fever?" He asked Ishrani without looking away from the children. "None." Keth swallowed a pebble and it reappeared, victorious. Rava attempted to stalk the light. The light remains at large. Soon discovered he can fit his muzzle through the slat of the baffles, and now believes he is a serpent. Close the slat to finger widths. It is already done. Sharek exhaled approval. His gaze tipped toward the high slit of window set to one side of the nursery. Beyond it, Karesh's sky churned with fine dust, the kind that crept in anywhere that wasn't sealed and wrote its name on teeth. Heat lightning flickered in a pale line along the horizon. A storm would come by late day. The bastion was built to drink storms, but storms made tempers thin. He had planned to leave after one more circuit of the wall. 2 skirmish reports waited on his desk. 1 Terran prisoner waited in chains and uncooperative silence. The human's file was thin. Corporal Elian Ross, Recon, Terran Federation Marine Corps. Captured 3 weeks ago during a sensor sweep. A stray who had not yet given up whatever bones of intel rattled in his gut. Sharek logged the data point and slid it away mentally with the other small necessities of war. "Today is veiling," Ishrani said. Sharek grunted, the old tradition tugging the corner of his mouth. Once a cycle, high-born cubs spent a day with their scent tags removed. It taught them their own edges. It taught the keepers humility. It also wreaked havoc on a fortress risk metrics. Their trackers will be. Sharak prompted without prompting. Offline, Ishrani said, and did not quite flinch under the weight of his stare. Only until sun's middle. We will confine their run to the inner courts. I'll double the scent hounds at the thresholds and baffle the vents. Triple the hounds. Sharak said. The vents are already baffled. Ishrani nodded, the scent of respect rising like spice. Yes, great one. He wanted to tell her to keep the tags on. He wanted to tell her that in war, traditions that made your offspring easier to steal had to bend. But he heard his grandmother's dry laugh in the back of his head. Zerati cubs do not grow in nets. If they could not find themselves in the safe center of a fortress, what chance would they have in the copper dunes beyond? Very well, he said. At sun's middle, the tags go back on. They will be back on, Ishrani promised. And the promise had the weight of stone. Sharak touched his cubs one last time, then straightened. At the door, he paused. The cubs had fallen into a tangle of play that looked like a fight and felt like prayer. Kef feinted and shouldered. Rava pivoted with dancer precision. Soon invented a move that was mostly flailing. He would need both hands today, he always did, but some part of him wanted to stay and watch. To memorize the exact angle at which Rava's ears tilted. When she thought she was invisible, he left before the wanting could make a fool of him. Veiling began at the precise instant the sun struck the nursery's north brace and turned it bright. Ishrani pressed a reader to each cub's tag. The tiny devices chirped, unlatched, and came away slick with their own protective oils. She dropped them into an ebon bowl lined with brine to keep the tag scent honest, and set the bowl on a high shelf. Remember, she said, and bared her teeth just enough to be seen. Inner courts only. The world beyond the red tiles is not yet yours. Keth immediately tested the boundary, which was exactly what a proper eldest did. He paced along the red tiles at the edge of the court with mock indifference, then slunk low as if he could slide beneath the line if he was thin enough. Rava sat at the center and examined the air, soon trotted over to a screen that looked out over the lower refectories, and chirped at his reflection until it chirped back. Ishrani's assistants drifted into place the way long practice taught them to drift, everywhere and nowhere. Attention soft, bodies relaxed, ready to explode into a sprint. A pair of scenthounds, sleek, long-legged, their muzzles filigreed, with sensor nodes, took their posts at the thresholds. Above, the vents' baffles closed to finger widths tighter. The first hours unwound like silk from a spool. Kef found a sloped ramp along the nursery's western wall and turned it into a speed trial. Rava stalked a mechanical mouse until it squeaked surrender. Soon discovered that refraction through the drinking pool made his paw look very large, and fell in love with his giant self. Heat drew toward its peak. In the outer courtyards, soldiers rolled water across the pavers to cool them. In the kitchens, ice bricks sighed into troughs. The recon kites returned from their morning sweep, with a scatter of low-value images, the backs of sandskinks, a heat shimmer that might have been Terran armor or might have been hope. The brig ticked its pulse counts down the long stone vector of afternoon. Somewhere below the nursery, a maintenance drone entered shaft 3C to vacuum accumulated grit from a vent. The drone's camera blinked in the low light, then recorded a smooth, inexplicable section of feed, static that showed no motion, no sound, for exactly 120 seconds. Then the feed resumed. The technician on duty, Talern of the second shift, flagged the anomaly and sent an alert ping toward systems. The ping was rooted, acknowledged, queued. It would be read in 8 minutes. The anomaly was read by someone else in 4. Ishrani lifted her nose, nostrils flaring, catching a thread of something that didn't belong. Not a threat, not blood, not metal, not the harsh ammoniac snap of a breached cell, but movement. Maybe, or a different repeated rhythm under the usual thrum of obelisk. She was opening her mouth to call for a scent sweep when Soon made a sound. She had not heard from him before. It was not fear. It was pure attention given a shape. He had climbed, as he had yesterday and the day before, onto the low shelf beneath the northern screen. He liked the ghost cub he found there. Today, the screen had been switched from reflexive display to a deep view of the bastion's lower levels for training another part of veiling, to show them the belly of their shelter so they knew it as more than rumors. The deep view moved slowly, tracing the corridors around the brig. Blue was cool. Red was warm. White was very warm. The cub put his paws on the glass and breathed fog against it, and his reflection did the same. Past the fog, in an otherwise blue corridor, a single white ellipse pulsed at a steady interval. Then again, heartbeat. Soon's ears angled forward. He touched the glass with one cautious claw. Rava looked up, because she always looked up when Soon made a new sound. Keth followed, because it would have infuriated him to be left behind in a discovery. All three cubs stared. The ellipse pulsed again. Calm, regular, a stone in a river. Zerati young were not blank slates when they came into the world. They arrived with old programs running. One of those programs listened for heartbeats and sorted them along a spectrum: fear, hunger, rage, peace. Most beat with noise around them, the shiver of weapons, the scream of metal feet, the clamor of chemical distress. This one beat like a task completed in good order. Soon chuffed question. Rava huffed, not our den. Keth, eldest and therefore responsible for protecting the family from everything including curiosity, turned to Ishrani to see whether the adult world thought this information mattered. Ishrani had already crossed half the room. Down, she said, and her voice came out sharper than she liked. She had the spike of her own heartbeat with a touch of scent, but the cubs tasted the edge of it anyway. They hopped down, obedient, but unsatisfied. Inner courts, Ishrani reminded them. Inner eyes. Soon made a private little sound to the floor as if to apologize to it for existing somewhere else. Veiling resumed its half-sleepful glide. The heat reached apex and began to soften. The recon kites were rearmed. The afternoon squads changed place. Ishrani let the cubs tumble through the water curtain and attack their reflection, until even Keth's enormous pride admitted defeat. She towel-dried them with a rough laughing noise that meant family, and they tolerated it because she was hers. At sun's middle, Ishrani reached for the Iban bowl, the brine tags, and the quiet ritual of reattachment that returned the nursery to simple arithmetic. Her fingers closed on air. She looked down once more, then again, then at the shelf itself. Empty. The bowl was there. The ring of brine faint against its lip. The tags were not. Who removed the tags? She asked in a voice so even it turned everyone else into hypersensitive creatures. The assistant keepers glanced at one another. No one had touched the bowl. The scent around it said as much. Stone, brine, her own hand. Nothing else. Search, Ishrani said, and because she had been raised by warriors, she did not immediately stop to grieve the insult to her competence. She planned. Send hounds on me. Locks, show me your honesty. The room obeyed. Hounds moved. Doors sealed with a clean click. The vents, already baffled, narrowed further for fingers, then 3. The nursery lights rebalanced toward the cool spectrum that made contrast sharp for their eyes. Ishrani sent a ping to systems asking for a map of heat traces in a 2-level cylinder. Around the nursery core. The map came back as a lattice cage full of points. Points moved. Points were alive. 3 points she wanted were labeled Keth. Rava Sunan glowed a comfortable green. Then the labels blinked, briefly, and went dark. I don't like that, said Ishrani, aloud this time. She could taste her own adrenaline in her mouth. False return from the old veiling protocol. Keeper. Systems replied over the wall, polite as glass. We are resetting registry now. Please hold. I will not hold. Ishrani said to the wall that had been given a voice to make it easier to hate. Give me stair cameras. Give me shaft feeds. Give me floor pressure on the inner courts. Give me the north screen's deep view on every surface in this room. The bastion, not offended, obeyed. Stone faces became windows. The room filled with moving images, corridors, shafts, stairs. The lull and flow of soldiers at their work. The scent hounds' handlers eased their animals toward the thresholds. The hounds put their noses down and read the floor. Their hackles did not lift. They did not bay. They moved, puzzled, noses sifting in something like a figure 8. The north screen's deep view, still aimed at the brig's level, showed the same slow trace of heat. As before, blue corridors, red vents, a white ellipse in a room whose door sat under more seals than a vault. Heartbeat. Ishrani resisted looking at it, which meant she looked twice. The heartbeat did not speed up or slow down. It did not betray interest in being looked at. A mind flicked across hers. If I were a cub, I would think that sound meant food or home. She ignored the mind. She landed in her body again and took inventory. Keth was on the west ramp, watching for her permission. Rava was half under the bench where she liked to pretend she was not. Soon she turned, her head was at her knee, peering past her with his head tilted. Soon, she said, gentle, and reached for him without looking away, because the way of keeping was to keep 3 edges of the triangle in sight at all times. Her hand caught air. Soon, she said again. Rava withdrew from under the bench and put her head on Ishrani's shin. Keth, who would have died rather than be needy in front of his siblings, came anyway until his shoulder pressed Ishrani's calf. The pressure made her stomach drop. The way prey knows a shadow. He was not at her knee. He had never been at her knee. He had been at her knee in her imagining, where she still had time. Ishrani did not shout. She inhaled once, packed the breath in tight, and sent one scent into the room. Stay. Keth froze. Rava froze. The assistants became sculptures with breath between their teeth. The hounds' tails ceased their uneasy half-wag. The whole nursery went still enough to hear the membrane of the water curtain vibrating. Seal. Ishrani said. And every door answered, every vent narrowed to a whisper slit. Every lock took on the pleasant heavy scent of iron where it met its mate. No breach. No alarm beyond hers. The world outside continued to make normal war noises. Inside the most protected room in the bastion, a cub had ceased to be where he was supposed to be. Keeper, systems said, and there was a new edge in its voice now. Algorithmic neutral fraying. We are seeing a false positive cascade on registry updates. Please confirm physical head count. 2, Ishrani said. The word came out small and furious. 2 in hand, 1 not. General override call to Sharak. Now. The override rang in Sharak's ear while he was halfway between the wall and the midcourts, where the engineers were arguing about a sand-pitted bearing. He did not run when he heard Ishrani's voice. Running sends the wrong scent. He walked very quickly, in a straight line. His guards, attuned to the vector of that walk, turned with him and lengthened their stride. Tell me, he said, before the door learned his shape and opened. Veiling, Ishrani said. Already bowed. At sun's middle I reached for the tags. They were gone. Soon as gone. Locks are true. No breach. I have 2. I have the room. Sharak's lungs did something he did not allow them to do in public. His body prepared to break something. He stood still instead and looked where she wanted him to look. The 3 of them, Sharak, Ishrani. The bastion itself went to the tools. They scrolled the cameras back. They spun the heat lattice. They overlaid pressure data on floor plans and filtered for small, soft mass. They color swapped. They compressed time and watched the room play at half speed, and then a quarter. They looked for the moment when soon left being a body and became instead a question. They found nothing. It is hard for a predator to admit confusion. Admitting it in front of your soldiers is how you become a story told in someone else's camp. Sharak admitted it to himself and then to Ishrani. Because the cubs had made both of them honest creatures. Someone obscured the cameras, he said. Because the words needed ground. 2 minutes of dead feet in 3C. An inside hand, or an outsider with inside teeth. No one crossed a threshold, Ishrani said. And her voice had gone down into the register where the floor could feel it. The hounds do not scream. The vents are baffles. The cord is sealed. He is not here. He is not anywhere. Keth made a noise then. A small involuntary exhale that no one else would have heard if they did not belong to him already. Rava pressed her head harder into Ishrani's shin, as if weight could undo absence. Sharak did not look at his remaining offspring, because if he did he would scoop them both up and curl around them on the floor like an animal. He looked at the north screen instead, the deep view of the brig's level, thrown across every surface now like a propped mirror, showed its patient geometry. Blue corridors, red vents. White heartbeat. Who is that? Sharak asked, though he knew. Systems supplied the file. Prisoner, Terran Federation. Rank, Corporal. Name, Elian Ross. Sharak's lip lifted, not in contempt, in thought. The heartbeat's interval remained a metronome. If there was another scent under it, fear, rage, hunger, the machine could not read it. Keep your 2. He told Ishrani. Dogs on half-length leashes. Anyone touches a vent without your scent on them. Break their hand and ask me later whether it was wise. Done, Ishrani said. He turned to the guard captain. "Lock the brig to my scent alone." "Yes, great one. And wake the hive. I want every drone we have inside the walls. If a stone spider could carry him, I want it sniffing. Every stair, every shaft, every conveyance. If a hair is out of place in this room, I will count the places." The bastion moved, then, in the way a living thing does when its core is threatened. Doors that had never closed before slid into their frames and made new lines and maps. Soldiers found their tongues drying and their backs straightening without orders. Engineers smelled their own fear and translated it into useful lists. In the hangars, the recon kites reconfigured their flight plans inward, not outward, and went hunting corridors like swallows. Ishrani knelt so she would be at eye height with Keth and Rava. Keth bared his baby teeth as if shame were something he could bite. Rava did not blink. "Stay," Ishrani breathed again. The scent of the word tucked itself around them like a blanket. Sharak stood in the center of his fortress and listened to its bones singing. Somewhere, a small body had chosen the shape of a gap and become it. The part of his brain that did logistics ran possible maps. The part that remembered being a cub pricked its ears. On the walls, the brig's white ellipse continued to mark out a patient life. The heartbeat did not hurry. In its rhythm was something most soldiers forgot under armor: the quiet gravity of a body at rest and still deciding. The alarm that followed was not a siren. It was a scent bitter cold, acid clean that meant not in the maps. It came from within the walls of the nursery itself, waist height, behind a maintenance panel that had been sealed since before Ishrani took her post. The panel hissed. A crack of cooler air licked the room. Every muscle pointed in its direction. Sharak reached it in for steps, slammed his palm against the latch, and lifted the panel free. Behind, a shaft no wider than his forearm. Cold air sluiced across his face. A trace of metal oil, a smear of dust, and a thread of scent so faint it could have been imagined. Cub, layered with something else. Not Terran, not Zerati. The place where lack is a smell soon was not in the shaft. The shaft had the shape of a doorway that had been used exactly once, since the last time anyone remembered. Scratches along the lower edge shone where the bare stone had been rubbed clean recently, as if small paws had shoved there, then slid. Sharak's voice was a calm sea over drop. He has chosen a path. He looked up at the walls full of maps like living fish. The white ellipse in the blue corridor pulsed on with machine indifference. He did not believe in omens. He did not believe in anything softer than stone. "Find him," he said. Obelisk Bastion did what it was built to do. It sealed, it sent, it sought somewhere below. In the cool belly of the fortress, where sound moved like thought through conduits and vents, a cub followed a rhythm that made sense to his old animal brain. And though no one yet knew it down in a cell lined with iron and light, a human's heartbeat neither begged nor cursed. It waited, steady as a drum sounded at the start of a march, the kind that gives order to legs that would otherwise run in any direction. The desert beyond remembered nothing and cared less. The fortress remembered everything. In between those two unbending things, a small absence began to pull at the shape of war. The brig of Obelisk Bastion had no clocks. The Zerati did not measure confinement in hours or days. Time was expressed in intervals of resistance. How long a captive endured silence before speech? How many questions before they broke? How many days before their bodies yielded to the heat or the cold? Corporal Elian Ross had lasted 21 intervals. Still silent, still alive, still defiant, though the edges of that defiance had frayed. The cell was hewn from volcanic stone, walls rough enough to grate skin raw if one leaned too long. A grid of pale energy filaments crossed the only opening, humming faintly, and a thin trickle of recycled air hissed from a ceiling vent. No bedding, no food besides a slurry poured through a hatch once a day, no sound except the echo of boots in the corridor and the slow tick of his own heartbeat. Against silence, the Zerati had interrogated him for 5 intervals before realizing he would not speak. They had switched tactics: isolation, starvation, sensory assault. The Dominion believed humans were fragile things, made soft by their reliance on constant connection and chatter. Leave them alone, they thought, and loneliness would strip them bare. But Elian had grown up on Luna Station 14, in the shadow of the gas giant Keone, where the long nights were absolute and silence was thicker than sleep. He could wait in silence. He could hold himself together like a clenched fist. He told himself that every day. Still, the cell pressed closer with every breath. That evening, or what Elian guessed was evening, from the faint change in the air's temperature, he dozed in shallow snatches. Hunger gnawed at him, sharper than the bruises left by interrogations. His uniform was shredded, little more than a gray tunic and trousers stiff with dried blood. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Something warm brushed his chest. He jerked awake, fist half raised before the shackles yanked him back. His eyes darted downward. Not a dream. 3 small shapes huddled against him, their fur shimmering bronze gold in the dim light. They rose and fell with his breathing. Paws twitched faintly. Tiny rumbling purrs vibrated against his ribs. For a moment, Elian thought he had finally snapped, that this was the hallucination that came when hunger finally carved sanity down to its last nerve. But no, when he moved, one of the creatures shifted and tucked its snout deeper into the crook of his neck. Its fur was warm, its breath hot. They were alive. Elian's heart thudded once, hard enough that the cubs stirred. He froze, hardly daring to breathe. He knew what these were. He'd seen intelligence briefings, sketches on secure pads. The Zerati cubs, General Sharek's cubs, the most guarded creatures in the Dominion, the kind of beings that entire squads of Terran Marines would have traded their lives to capture. And here they were, sleeping on him. What the hell? He whispered under his breath. His voice cracked. The eldest cub, he guessed it was the largest one, lifted its head and blinked molten amber eyes at him. For one suspended second, human and Zerati youngling stared at each other. Elian expected teeth, claws, a shriek that would bring guards charging. Instead, the cub yawned, a small, toothy gape, absurdly ordinary. Then it slumped back down, pressing its way harder against Elian's ribs. The other to twitch their tails and purred louder, as though his heartbeat was a lullaby they recognized. Elian pressed his head back against the wall. His pulse thundered, his body trembled. This was insane, impossible. Every alarm in the fortress must already be screaming. Any second now, the guards with the corridor exploded with noise. Heavy boots pounded closer. The brig door slammed open, and a dozen Zerati soldiers stormed in, their armor bristling with weapons. Their growls shook the stone. Elian flinched back as best his chains allowed. The cubs stirred again, but instead of leaping away, they pressed closer, burrowing into his torn uniform, snarling tiny cub snarls at the guards. One snapped its milk teeth at the nearest soldier's clawed hand. The guards froze. Their eyes flicked from the cubs to the human, back again. For the first time since his capture, Elian saw something like fear in their gaze. Then the air thickened. General Sharek entered. He filled the doorway, a mountain of fur and scarred muscle, his shadow blotting out the light. His eyes glowed like molten ore. His claws flexed once, and every soldier dropped their gaze. Elian felt the weight of that gaze land on him, not on the cubs, but on him, as though Sharek could burn through his chest and read his heart directly. "You," the general rumbled, his voice low and lethal. "Explain this." Elian swallowed. His mouth was dry as ash. "I can't," he said hoarsely. "They came to me," the cubs hissed when Sharek stepped closer, their fur bristling. One latched onto Elian's collar with its tiny jaws as if to anchor itself. Sharek stopped. His eyes narrowed. His nostrils flared as he drew in scent, ancient instinct at work. His lips pulled back, baring fangs. The cubs purred louder. The brig held its breath, and Elian, chained, bruised, starving, with 3 enemy cubs clinging to him like he was their den, realized that his survival now depended on a truth he couldn't begin to understand. The brig stank of ozone and fear. Guards bristled with their rifles, claws flexing against trigger guards. Every eye was fixed on the impossible sight. 3 Zerati cubs curled against the chest of a chained Terran prisoner, purring as if he were the safest nest in the galaxy. General Sharek stood motionless in the doorway, the storm of his presence filling the room. His warriors didn't breathe. The cubs didn't move. Elian Ross sat as still as stone, though his pulse hammered. His brain screamed, "Do something," but his instincts knew any sudden twitch might be read as provocation. So he let the cubs press closer, his arms slack in their chains. Eyes locked on the generals. The silence was brittle enough to shatter under a breath. Finally, Shark spoke. "Guards, withdraw." The soldiers jerked, confused. One ventured. "General." Shark's head snapped toward him. The growl that followed was a knife dragged over stone. "Do you question my command?" "No, Great One." The warrior slammed his fist to his chest. At once, the squad backed out of the brig, weapons lowering with visible reluctance. The cell door sealed, leaving only the general, the human, and the cubs. The silence deepened. Shark approached slowly, claws scraping the stone floor. His gaze pinned Elian like a spear. "You claim they came to you." The words vibrated through the air. Elian licked his cracked lips. "I didn't take them. Didn't trick them. I woke up and they were." Here, the general's nostrils flared, drawing in sense. Zerati cubs trusted instinct more than reason. They knew true intent the way others knew heat from cold. For them to have chosen a human a prisoner was heresy. Yet the evidence was curled against Elian's ribs. Refusing to leave, Shark crouched, lowering his massive frame until his eyes were level with Elian's. The glow in them was less fury now, more something ancient, curiosity sharpened by suspicion. "Do you know what this means?" the general asked. Elian's voice was raw. "That I'm probably dead either way." The cubs gave a rumbling purr as if disagreeing. One gnawed on the hem of his sleeve. Another kneaded at his chest with tiny claws that barely pierced fabric. Shark extended a claw toward the eldest cub. "Keth, come." Keth blinked. Then, astonishingly, he hissed at his own father and burrowed closer to Elian's side. The air changed. A ripple of shock rolled through the general's scent, subtle but undeniable. Shark froze, his claw still extended. "Impossible," he murmured, almost to himself. Elian swallowed, daring to break the silence. "Looks like they trust me." The words hung between them. Dangerous words. Shark's gaze snapped back to him, molten fury sparking. "You will not twist this into power, Terran." His fangs glinted. "If you seek to boast of this bond, I will gut you before your throat opens to speak." Elian held his stare, exhaustion sharpening his honesty. "I'm not boasting. I don't even understand it." For a heartbeat, only the hum of the cell's barrier filled the space. Then, from somewhere deep in the fortress, alarms wailed. A storm front had broken across Karesh Prime, the sand-thick kind that swallowed entire convoys. Thunder rolled through the walls, mingling with the brig's electric buzz. The cubs stirred uneasily. The youngest whimpered and pressed its muzzle beneath Elian's chin. Shark inhaled, long and slow. He smelled not deceit, not fear, but something else radiating from the human calm. Even under threat, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that the cubs had heard and chosen. Tradition coiled in his mind like an old serpent. Zerati cubs did not lie. If they clung to this human, it was not accident. It was truth. But what kind of truth? The brig door slammed open again without permission. A commander barged in, armor rattling, breath heavy with panic. "General." The hive search failed. The vent shafts were tampered with. "We cannot track how the cubs left the nursery." The fortress, his words cut off as his eyes fell on the sight before him. The missing cubs alive. Safe, pressed against a human's chest. The commander staggered back, sent bursting with confusion. General, they chose him." Shark rose to his full height, every line of him radiating danger. "Leave, but leave, or I tear out your throat myself." The commander fled. Shark turned back to Elian. His voice was lower now, not soft, but carrying the weight of decision. "This war is built on absolutes. Zerati and Terran, predator and prey. But my blood does not lie. If they trust you, then I must ask why." Elian exhaled shakily. "I don't have an answer for you." "You will find one," Shark said. And there was no mistaking it as anything less than a command. "Until then, you live. Because they have chosen you." The cubs purred louder, as if sealing the bargain, and as the storm outside battered Obelisk Bastion, drowning the desert in lightning and sand, Corporal Elian Ross understood that he had just become something far more dangerous than a prisoner. He had become indispensable. The storm howled outside Obelisk Bastion, sand slamming against the fortress walls like waves against a cliff. Lightning forked across Karesh Prime's skies, thunder rattling the stone foundations. Inside, the storm was quieter but no less dangerous. Word had spread. From the lowest drone handlers to the highest wing commanders. Whispers curled like smoke. The cubs were found. With the human, Sharik's offspring, curled against Terran flesh. To some, it was omen. To others, blasphemy. The Bastion had not seen such unrest since its founding. Soldiers eyed one another in corridors, sense spiking with unease. A few muttered of executions. Others murmured of prophecy. Sharik knew. He smelled it everywhere he walked. He carried the weight of his army's eyes even more heavily than the storm above. And at the center of it all was the prisoner. Elian Ross had been moved, not freed, not unshackled, but shifted from his stone cell to a guarded chamber within the fortress's core. 1,000 eyes tracked him wherever he was led. Guards snarled under their breath. Servitors paused their tasks to glance, but no one dared approach too closely. Because the cubs followed, they trailed him with unshakable loyalty, padding after the clink of his chains, curling beside him when he sat. They nipped at any guard who tried to pull him too roughly, growled if a soldier's claw lingered too near. Their fur bristled at threats, smoothed at his voice. The fortress had become a paradox. The most hated prisoner was also the safest creature. Within its walls, in the War Council chamber, the air crackled with tension. Sharik stood at the head of the great basalt table, his claws sunk into its surface. Around him, his lieutenants argued in low, heated growls. "This is manipulation," snarled Commander Vurik, his spines rattling. "The Terran has bewitched them. Kill him before the cubs are poisoned further. Kill him," countered strategist Moran, "and the cubs will tear their own flesh in grief. They have chosen. To defy that choice is to invite fracture within the general's line. Is that what you want? To see Sharik's bloodline splinter?" The chamber rumbled with dissent. Some agreed with Vurik, better to end the human now, no matter the cubs' cries. Others leaned toward Moran's logic, fearing the taboo of denying the instincts of Zerati young. Sharik silenced them with a roar that shook the stone walls. "My offspring have chosen." His voice rolled like thunder. "They scent no deceit in the human, no fear, no betrayal. They smell truth. Do you doubt the judgment of my blood?" No one dared answer, but doubt still hung, unspoken, in the room's heated air. Meanwhile, Elian sat in his chamber, back against the wall, cubs sprawled across his lap. He stared at them with a mixture of awe and unease. "How the hell did I end up here?" he whispered. The eldest cub lifted its head at his voice, ears twitching. Its molten eyes met his. Elian felt something stir, an unspoken understanding, primal and wordless. It wasn't just that they trusted him. It was that they recognized something in him, something he had carried without knowing. Responsibility. He had fought to survive, fought to protect his squad, fought to keep secrets from the enemy. But now these cubs, children of his sworn enemy, had chosen him as shield, den, protector. And somehow, despite everything, he couldn't reject them. "You've just made me the most valuable target in the galaxy," he muttered, stroking the soft, metallic sheen of their fur. "Great, thanks for that," the cub purred. That night, Sharik came. The general entered the chamber alone, dismissing the guards with a flick of his claw. He loomed over Elian, who rose stiffly, the cubs clinging to his legs. "Marine," Sharik said, his voice low, steady. "You understand what has happened?" Elian met his gaze. "Not really, but I know it's big. Bigger than me." Sharik nodded slowly. "The cubs do not lie. They see what we cannot. For them to choose you." His claws flexed, scraping the stone floor. "It is dangerous. It undermines the walls we have built between our peoples." Soldiers already whisper. Some see omen, some see curse. "And you?" Elian asked, surprising himself with the boldness. Sharik's eyes glowed. "I see opportunity. A weapon more subtle than fleets. If my cubs bond with a Terran, perhaps others may see that the war is not written in blood alone." Elian stared. "You're saying peace." "Not peace," Sharik growled, shaking his head. "Not yet, but a fracture in the pattern. A chance to shape a different path." The cubs purred at their father's voice, but did not release Elian. They pressed closer, as if binding the two of them together with invisible cords. Elian exhaled. "So what happens to me?" Sharik's answer was simple. "You live, not as prisoner, not yet as ally, but as Den Guardian. Until the cubs release you, Your life is tied to theirs. The words hung heavy. For Elian, it was a reprieve from execution, but also a burden heavier than chains. For Sharuk, it was a gamble that could shift the war. For the cubs, it was simply truth. Outside, the storm raged, tearing at the desert with all its fury. Inside Obelisk Bastion, a different storm brewed, one of whispers, doubts, and dangerous hope. And in the quiet of that night, a Terran Marine and an enemy general stood bound together by 3 small lives, unaware that the bond would echo across systems, change strategies, and perhaps, just perhaps, end a war, not with fleets, not with fire,